It's no secret that just about everyone knows about the Terminator, the 1984 sci-fi classic about a human-looking machine sent to kill a woman whose unborn son would be the future leader of the resistance against said machines. Was a smash hit in theaters and cemented Arnold Schwarzenegger as a celebrity icon. This was especially revved up when Terminator 2 Judgment Day came out in 1991 and became one of the highest grossing films ever made. As time went on, more films came out and, depending on who you ask, are either good or bad continuations of the story. But what about Terminator video games? Yeah, there were games based on the first two films that vary on success, mostly in the negative light, but during the life of the Big Green there were 3 games based on the fight against Skynet. The first served as a prequel to the first film, the second an adaptation of the third film, and the last game another adaptation of the third film. Seeing as how it was interesting to play through the Matrix games last time, I thought it'd be fun this go around to go through the Terminator games on Xbox and see how they fare up. Though, I have to admit I've never really played them. Okay, scratch that. I played one of them a long time ago, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, let's take a look at the beginning of this series with Terminator Donna Fate. As stated a while ago, Donna Fate is a prequel to the first movie, taking place in the future after Judgment Day occurred, and the war between the Resistance and the Machines rage on. You fill the shoes of 3 characters, all members of John Connor's command: Justin Perry, Catherine Luna, and Terminator 1 protagonist Kyle Reese, as they make their way to Skynet's base of operations. They discover that the AI has indeed discovered time travel, and plans to send a machine back in time to kill John's mother Sarah, preventing his birth and killing the Resistance before it even begins. I have to admit it's pretty cool to see more of the destroyed future left by Skynet and the war going on, as the movies kinda don't show that much of it. They're more focused on preventing said war. Well, I mean, of course there's salvation, but yeah, you know, we don't talk about that one. Even more, it's a nice touch to see more of Reese, especially when he's interacting with John, considering their shared destinies. One thing that bothered me a bit was this side story involving one of John's soldiers betraying the team because of his brother being killed in action, and he blames them for it. It's not so much that it's bad, but more that this side plot really isn't utilized, feeling more like it was shoehorned in at the last minute. I won't go into too much detail about this guy, but let's just say the words sequel bait and move on. It's hard for me to really classify what kind of a game Donna Fate is. Yeah, it's a third-person action game, but it feels very much like a Devil May Cry type of game. You play through 10 stages, completing objectives and shooting your way through Skynet's army of machines to get to the end, using a variety of guns, explosives, and a stun baton for melee, along with an adrenaline boost that doubles your damage. And of course there's a couple of turret sections thrown in because video games. Killing enemies earns you Skynet tech that you use at the end of each level to level up your health, armor, ammo, and adrenaline. Kinda like the red orbs in Devil May Cry. To help you aim properly at enemies, you can aim in first person by holding the left trigger. However, you can't move while aiming, so it's more for precision shots. Meanwhile, the right trigger is your lock-on, allowing you to strafe around your enemies and fire. Kinda like Devil May Cry. Unfortunately, this lock-on is not very player-friendly, as sometimes you'll end up locking onto an enemy way off in the distance, as opposed to the one right in your face smacking away at you. This can, and probably will, lead to many a game over, though there are checkpoints, so that was nice of the developers. Controlling your 3 heroes is decent enough, but with any game that controls in 3D with fixed camera angles, you come across that annoying mishap of having to let go of the stick to reset movement when you switch to a new camera. Even with a mini-map, you'll still end up confused sometimes on where you're going from the constant camera switching, hence the lock-on. Also, you can't tell me that they didn't rip off DMC's door opening animation. Sadly, Dawn of Fate is riddled with bugs and glitches that can and will screw up your game. For instance, I had to fight this robot walker on an elevator that ended up knocking me through the ground, causing me to get stuck. Now, I could still get hit by it, and I was able to destroy it, though I was soft-locked into the floor, causing me to have to restart the entire stage over. Regardless, if you want to call Dawn of Fate a Devil May Cry clone, It's not a bad one, but just be wary of these flaws. When it comes to visuals, Donna Fate does show its age, but it's not all bad. Being a game completely set in a post-apocalyptic future, the stages all look destroyed, old, and abandoned like you'd expect, like this old hotel and asylum for instance, all the way up to the sleek silver Skynet headquarters. As for characters, they don't look bad either, but you can tell they weren't able to afford the likeness of Arnold and Michael Biehn, who played Kyle in the original movie. Moving into the music, it's an interesting bag. The tracks composed by Bob Daspit are really nice, with a fusion of rock and techno that went along well with the game. The other half of the soundtrack are songs written and recorded by the band Fear Factory, which of course means I can't play it here. But I can say this. If you're fans of Fear Factory, chances are you've heard these songs and you probably like them. What isn't as smooth is the voice acting. Don't get me wrong, there's a few decent performances, but then you have the numerous soldiers you'll come across who sound either lost or trying too hard at a southern accent.
We tried to run through. Too many of them. They moved too quick. Just saw flashes. Jose got burned to a crisp. I fell back.
Just lie back and wait for the medic.
I got hit pretty hard, Sarge. The next room is completely dark. Can't see anything but red eyes and plasma flashes.
Stay put, Private. The medic should be by soon enough.
Take some of my ammo. I took it off Eastwood when they wasted them.
Also, is it just me, or does John Connor sound like Zap Brannigan?
We're really getting pounded out there, General Connor.
We'll get you back into the fight, Captain Perry. But first you should see what Haven sent us. Skynet's newest infiltration unit exactly mimics a human's appearance. These images were recovered from the security system at Oregon Base. You can see that the forward guards are unaware that the infiltrator has slipped past them.
The Terminator Dawn of Fate is a noble attempt to fill in the story that leads up to the first film, and despite the frustrations I had with it, mainly the glitches and useless lock-on, I had fun with it. It was nice to have a DMC-ish game on the big screen, and even though the plot was a bit thin, I enjoyed the characters and what little time I got with them. If you're a fan of Terminator and action games, this one's worth the pickup, as long as you're okay with a few flaws in the system. And going back to that sequel bait line I said earlier, Dawn of Fate was setting up for another entry, but sadly that never came to be. Critically, the game was middle of the road, and I'm guessing sales weren't the best, so Atari decided instead to use their newly acquired Terminator rights for the upcoming film sequel. Being a straight-up tie-in to the movie, Rise's plot follows the film pretty closely, with a few sections taking place in the future. You play as a reprogrammed T-800 model who goes back in time to stop the new machine assassin known as the TX from killing John Connor and his future wife Kay Brewster, and, well, you know, stopping the resistance from being created and prevent Judgment Day, blah 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 blah. With the game, you get to see more of the T-800's mission in the future, making his way with an older Kate to the time chamber. Other than that, if you've seen the movie, you know what happens. Not much else to say on that. T3's gameplay sticks to a more traditional first-person shooter, progressing through the levels and, well, completing objectives while blasting machines and humans throughout time. You'll pick up a few weapons throughout the future and present time, like laser rifles, plasma grenades, and more bullet-based guns like shotguns and miniguns. One thing that I thought was a bit interesting was that most of the future weapons all use the same ammo, so I would end up running out of ammo for one gun, thinking I could just switch to another and keep fighting, only for me to not have any ammo for that gun either. I gotta admit, it's a bit on the annoying side, but I kinda see why they made that choice. Anyway, the gunplay is pretty standard, with Arnold having his trusty Terminator Vision to identify allies, enemies, and items, as well as a lock-on, and I'll go ahead and tell you, this lock-on is just as useful as it was in Dawn of Fate, as in it too doesn't want to actually lock on to enemies. I would blast God knows how many shotgun shells into these guys and they'd just sit there like I was throwing pebbles at them. Then they'd run in place. Yeah, the AI isn't very smart in this game. They're also pretty cheap, spawning a room of machines on you suddenly without warning, especially if you're escorting someone and they instantly die because of it. That, or it's because their AI is stupid too. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention the other type of gameplay in T3, the fighting sections. In some parts, it switches to a one-on-one fighting game against either another Arnold or the TX herself, with your controls being a punch, grab, and block. I'm not going to beat around the bush, these stages suck the big one. First off, Arnold controls like a dump truck that has to take a poop. Trust me, the analogy works. And there's a slight delay in performing any move, meaning the enemy will just wail on you until you're dead. However, there is a quick and effective method to win every battle. Run into them over and over. That's it. Just keep pulling that off and you're golden. God, this was awful. But even with shoddy hit detection, cheap AI, and an awful shoehorn fighting mode, Rise of the Machines manages to add a cherry on top of the trash sundae by having limited continues. When you die, you have 3 continues, allowing you to come back where you died. Once those are depleted, you have to restart the stage. You know, in a time where first-person shooters are trying to emulate the massive success of Halo, having a live system seems very backwards, especially given all the crap I mentioned. But hey, at least you can unlock Missile Command and Centipede. Yay? Visually, T3 is... well, it's... I'll just say that Donna Fate looked better. The levels all look like they were made on a PS1 and slightly bumped up in resolution, which for the Xbox is not very good, giving the game a very budget title feel and not the $50 people were charged back then. I can say at least the 2003 stages are faithful to the movie. Meanwhile, the character models of the leads try to look like their real-life counterparts, and they slightly succeed, while enemy robots look pretty good, probably due in part to not having to animate facial animations and adding human features. As for Arnold and the TX, they look okay in the fighting stages, but it's a nice touch that the T800 does take visual damage as your health is lowered. Just like the Matrix games, T3 does that thing where some scenes are from the movie and then they kind of merge with cutscenes made for the game, with very mixed results. Also, I'm not sure why it was doing this, but during game cutscenes, my copy had these black bars on the top and the bottom cutting through the screen. I had heard that this was an issue when playing the game on an Xbox 360, but why it happened on an OG Xbox is beyond me. Going into audio, the music doesn't have Fear Factory this time around, instead going for more of an orchestrated sound, and it's there. It's nothing really special. Voice acting again harkens back to Path of Neo, with a combination of the actors providing VO via archive footage, with the new actors playing the roles of the game, with the exception of Arnold as the T-800 and Nick Stahl reprising his role of John Connor. I'd say everyone does a mediocre job, but Arnold might take the spot from RoboCop as the most bland-sounding machine in a video game.
Rock and roll. Excellent. Your system integrity has been compromised. You must be terminated.
There's no kind way to say this. Rise of the Machines is bad. There's good ideas here, sure, but the combination of rushing the finished product out in time for a DVD release and the possible fact that the developer made Fugitive Hunter, you know, the game where you get in a fist fight with Osama bin Laden, well, it just made for another movie tie-in hot garbage game. But if you're a fan of Terminator 3, you might get some enjoyment out of this one. As you probably guessed, this game didn't do well critically, and as for sales, I'm not entirely sure. But it must have been enough for Atari, as there was another Terminator 3 game being cooked up during development of Rise of the Machines, this time with the reins being handed back to Paradigm, who brought us Donna Fate. In fact, you could play a demo of this game on Rise of the Machines, a sort of palate cleanser for going through a crap game, I suppose. The following year, Terminator 3 The Redemption was released to critics, calling it the best of the Xbox Terminator games. But is it really? So, in what will probably be one of the shortest story summaries I've done here on the show, Redemption's plot is, again, the plot to the movie, with some extra parts in the future added to explain how the T-800 came to undertake this mission, because video games. Again, you like Terminator 3, you'll like this one. Let's move on. What's completely new and different, though, is the gameplay. Here, Redemption takes you through the story in 14 stages, all done in a third-person perspective, something akin to Gears of War. As the T-800, you'll make your way through the future and the past, completing the various stage objectives using a variety of guns, hand-to-hand combat, street signs, because why not, turrets and vehicles to get the job done. You also have good old Terminator Vision here, but it's a bit more useful as it actually can boost your damage output, getting stronger and having a longer time duration as you upgrade it, with points you collect during the game. Now, I'm guessing that because Paradigm's portfolio of work were mostly vehicle-based, you'll notice that you don't really spend a lot of time on foot, and you mostly commandeer numerous types of vehicles from future tanks to motorcycles and cars in 2003. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing, it's just a shame as the on-foot stuff is pretty decent and controls a little better than the vehicle stuff. So far though, this is leaps and bounds better than Rise of the Machines, but don't let that fool you, this T3 isn't totally redeemed. For starters, recovering health is an odd process. You have to absorb electricity to restore power. This can be done by executing Terminators to refill a bit of health, or going through a power surge to refill it to 100%. The thing is, these are very few and far between and can be easy to miss when you're in the middle of a chase stage. This especially doesn't help when the enemy AI is downright malicious when it comes to ending you. Trying to make it to your objective can be a nightmare in a vehicle stage when tons of enemies can swarm you, or worse yet, an enemy tank can take you out in 2 hits before you reach the end of the stage. Which leads into the biggest offender of Redemption. There are no checkpoints. That's right, you can get right to the end of a stage, get nipped by an enemy, and have to start the level all over again. Now, on one hand, I understand why there are not checkpoints, as these levels are actually quite short. But with a brutal difficulty spike, the devs must have felt to not add checkpoints for a tougher challenge. Well, they succeeded. Kind of. So in order to actually see what the rest of this game had to offer, I asked my chat while streaming this if I should use a code to progress, and they unanimously voted yes. Funny enough, even with a God mode code, the game can still end you due to running out of time or your escorted allies dying, so you're not out of the woods completely. If you need even more proof that this game is tough as hell, over on speedrun.com there's one run of the game and it's any percent with cheats on. No one has even bothered to try beating this game in a speed run without them. So if you think you can pull off a fast enough run without cheating, good news, the throne awaits you. Lastly, there's a co-op rail shooter mode you can play with a friend where you mow down Terminators with a turret. It's short, but it's fun to kill some time for a little bit. In the visual department, you can tell that Paradigm was given more time to work on Redemption as it looks a lot better than Rise. Stages actually look more like the areas shown in the film, and the future areas are especially great looking, like this fight that takes place on a giant enemy carrier. As for characters, the enemies look immensely better than in Rise, and vehicles actually look like vehicles and not paper mache. As for main characters, Arnold and the TX are again pretty close to the actors, plus Arnold gets body damage this time as well. Even John and Catherine look slightly more accurate this time, though in the cutscenes Arnold kinda looks a bit different. Just like in Rise, the cutscenes tend to swap between clips from the movie and CG versions, and it just doesn't mix well. Voice acting this time is a bit different. A sound-alike takes over for John this time around, and even the actress from Rise reprises Kate again. But in an odd choice, the T-800 is voiced by both Arnold and a sound-alike. It's incredibly off-putting when you hear Arnold talk to the other characters, then it switches to the other guy that doesn't really sound like him at all.
What the hell is that thing?
It is a Terminator, Model TX, designed for extreme combat.
Can't you find a way to destroy it?
Unlikely, and an obsolete design.
This is even more hilarious when you discover that this game has an Arnold button. Yes, an Arnold button. You press the white button and you hear Arnold deliver a horrible one-liner.
Exceptional. Get down. You're fired. This is where you get off. That is what I'm talking about. Don't lose your head. Terminated. Excellent.
I mean, it could be worse. They could have left in other lines he's recorded for other movies.
Where is she?
So can you believe how much I am in heaven? I'm like getting the feeling of coming in the gym. I'm getting the feeling of coming at home. I'm getting the feeling of coming backstage when I pump up, when I pose out in front of 5,000 people. I get the same feeling. So I'm coming day and night. I mean, it's terrific, right? So, you know, I'm in heaven.
As for music, it's about on par with Rise of the Machines, more orchestrated stuff, nothing really special. Is T3 the Redemption the actual namesake it says it is? Yes and no. While it's a definite improvement over Rise of the Machines, Redemption has its own flaws that still make it hard to recommend. If you're going to play it with cheats. Trust me, it's not going to kill your gamer cred or whatever if you care about things like that. Or if you like finger-numbing difficulty, then play Ninja Gaiden. At least you'll feel good about it. Regardless, the Redemption is an average way to round out the Terminator games on the big screen. And with that, Judgment Day has been prevented and the Terminator games are over. I thought out of all of this that Redemption would be the one I liked the most, but it turns out Donna Fate ended up being my favorite, with Redemption in second place and Rise of the Machines all the way back there. Which kind of sucks because that game had some cool stuff in it. It was just very half-baked and not very well developed. Either way, I think I'm going to take a break from reviewing 2 to 3 games at once. That and movie tie-ins. It gets tiring after a while. I think next time I'll keep it simple, just one game. But until then, this is the Dali Popka saying, as always, stay green, my friends. I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of me and the Big Green, then click that subscribe button and the bell to get notified when new content arrives. I want to say a special thank you to my patrons for helping not just the channel grow, but me as a creator. You have my forever thanks. If you're interested in the channel and would like to help it grow further, consider becoming a patron today. For the cost of a soda or an item on the dollar menu, you can help myself and the channel provide the best source of Big Green programming and more. Once again, all the thanks and love.